Nowhere Else to Go, Chapter 8, A Miraculous Ladybug Fanfiction. If you missed any of the previous parts, check the description box for links or click on the card in the upper right corner for the playlist. 9 days previously. Adrien approached the ajar door hesitantly. His friends were going out to the pool, but he was supposed to be home all day practicing the piano to prepare a piece for a competition. He had already practiced for hours, though, and he felt like it was as good as it was going to get today without him getting burnt out or injuring his hands. He figured he could play the piece for his father and potentially get permission to go to the pool for at least an hour. He should have been used to dealing with his father by now, but he was still nervous about asking him for a schedule change. 9 times out of 10, his requests were flatly denied. His father's standards were sky high, and Adrien was feeling less confident that his performance would be up to par with every step he took toward the door. But this was the year he had decided to fight for what he valued, and he valued his friends. He stopped right before pushing the door open when he heard his father's voice. Gabriel Agreste hated being interrupted when in the middle of a work matter, and Adrien had learned to steer clear of him whenever there was a potential to irritate him, to avoid the aftermath of his icy temper. He didn't mean to eavesdrop. He wasn't snooping. But the words that he heard rooted him to the spot. "Master, maybe you should listen to your conscience. This isn't the first time you've doubted your choices." Who could he be talking to? The voice didn't sound like it was coming from a video, and Adrien couldn't remember his father ever having a visitor to his office. And who would call him master? Not even the kitchen staff addressed him that way. "That's just the thing, Nuru. I don't have much of a choice." Nuru? Weird name. Adrien committed it to memory. "You could just let her go." "You know I can't do that, Nuru. I miss her too much." "But Master, countless human beings have lived and died." "Enough, Nuru." A muffled squeaking implied that whoever was in the room with his father had been rendered unable to speak. Adrien's skin prickled. What had his father done? Who was this visitor? And what were they talking about? Who was her? He said he missed her. Was it Adrien's mother? "I feel a strong negative emotion." Gabriel's icy voice cut over the sound of muffled struggles, and Adrien heard a faint ringtone as Gabriel placed a call. "Natalie, clear my schedule for the next hour, and make sure Adrien steers clear of the Champs-Élysées. I have a feeling this Akuma will be one of the strongest yet." Wait, what? Akuma? Adrien's blood ran cold as he mentally replayed his father's incriminating words. He suddenly remembered an afternoon with Ladybug on a rooftop ages ago when she had confidently told him that she suspected his father to be Hawkmoth. Had she been right? If it was true, he was about to send out an Akuma. Adrien had to stop it. With barely any time to think, he pushed the door open. "Father!" He caught his father with his fingertips pressed oddly into the painting of his mother, while a portal on the floor opened. He turned abruptly upon hearing Adrien come in, hands breaking contact with the painting, and the portal reversed, reverting to a normal floor. "Adrien!" he barked angrily. "I'm sorry, father," Adrien said, looking down. He was putting on the act of a submissive, obedient son, but his insides were quivering. He knew better than to acknowledge what he had seen and heard. He didn't know what he was doing and whether it was wise. All he knew was that he couldn't stand idly by and let his own father create a supervillain that would terrorize innocent people. "I wanted to ask..." What again? He struggled through the shock to remember why he had come here in the first place. "If I could go to the pool with my friends. I already practiced for 4 hours and could use a break." "No." "But..." I said no. "Please, father, at least listen to me play it once." Gabriel fixed his son with a piercing, cold glare. He didn't seem happy at all about being interrupted, but Adrien returned the glare with the firm look of determination, refusing to blink. If his father dismissed him now, he would akumatize someone. The least Adrien could do was try to prevent that. "You have one chance," his father said quietly, and strode briskly out of the office, leading the way to Adrien's room. The performance was dismal. Adrien's hands were shaking and clammy with a cold sweat. He couldn't think straight, but it had diffused the situation at least, and there wasn't an Akuma that night. Of course, his father had refused him permission to leave, but he didn't really need permission to get out. Adrien supposed he should be thankful for his father's busy schedule, or he and Ladybug would probably be facing Akumas all day without rest. It wasn't long after Gabriel left his room that Adrien saw the silver car pulling away, and he was essentially alone in the house, with the staff, who didn't really count as they weren't concerned with what he did. "Plague, who is Nuru?" Adrien asked, filled with dread. He already suspected the answer, but he needed to be sure. "The butterfly, Kwame." That was all the confirmation Adrien needed. "My father is Hawkmoth?" he asked his Kwame, a small part of him hoping Plague would answer no, against all the evidence. He would take that no. He felt lightheaded and his breaths were coming out short. "Sorry, kid," Plague said. "Hey, you should sit down. You don't look good." Adrien shook his head and called for his transformation. He had already packed a bag with a few sets of clothing and necessities as soon as his father left the room. Shouldering it in a daze, he opened a window and took off, hardly feeling the rooftops under his feet, running as far away from the mansion as possible. He found himself in an unfamiliar part of Paris, where an Akuma attack had never taken him. He dropped into an alley and curled into a ball, finally letting himself give in to the horror that had been building in him for the past hour. He clutched his legs, knees digging into his eye sockets, clawed gloves digging into his calves, and cried until it made him gag. He screamed voicelessly, squeezing the last dregs of air from his lungs. Of all the people, it had to be his father? Adrien had felt trapped before. He had felt stifled by his father's expectations, by his restrictive lifestyle. He had felt depression when his mother disappeared, when his father didn't acknowledge him. But until now, he had never known despair. He had no one, not even Natalie. He had nowhere to go. So in that unfamiliar alley behind a dumpster, accompanied by the pungent odor of decomposing food, he cried from the depths of his soul, rocking on his knees, shaking violently, all his muscles tensed. It wasn't enough to purge his heart of the fear, bitterness, and utter despair that filled him like a deadly poison. He didn't know how long he stayed like that. It felt like a long time, but he couldn't be sure. The sun was already setting when reason started trickling back into his brain, and he started to piece together a plan of action. Adrien knew that as soon as his father found out he was gone, he would notify the police and have a search party sent out to look for him. He would have to do something to prevent that. Transforming back, Adrien extracted his phone from its case and threw it at the dumpster as hard as he could. The screen shattered. Adrien stomped it underfoot, and in case that wasn't enough, he found a large, sharp rock and beat it against the phone a few times until he was sure the inner mechanisms were destroyed. Even if the GPS was still somehow intact, Adrien wouldn't be found anywhere near it. Chucking the remains of the phone into the dumpster, he called on Plague again and made a dash for the opposite side of Paris. Feeling raw and empty, Cat Noir walked into an electronics store and pulled out a wad of cash that he had stashed in his pocket. He walked up to the counter and asked for a prepaid phone. "Any special requests?" the employee asked, starstruck to be waiting on one of Paris's protectors. "It doesn't matter. The cheapest one." Cat Noir would normally smile and joke with the employee. He was very personable with civilians and tried to make them laugh, but he couldn't summon the strength to do so right now. He just stared at the counter as he waited for the employee to fetch the device. He paid for it and left the store, stomach twisting. This was the hard part. He was dreading it, but it had to be done to make sure his father wouldn't look for him. He vaulted onto the roofs and ran until he found one with the utility closet standing ajar. Ducking inside, he detransformed and ripped the plastic off the phone. Switching the device on, he dialed his father's number. His hands were shaking so violently that it took a while for him to get the numbers right. He hesitated before pressing the call button, glancing at the kwami who was floating by his shoulder. "Are you sure you want to do this, kid?" Plag's voice was surprisingly gentle. Tears welled up in Adrien's eyes again, but he furrowed his brow. He wouldn't be set off track. "I can't go back, Plag." He pressed call, screaming inside as the dial tone sounded once, twice. "Hello?" "Hello, Father." "Adrien, what is this number?" Ignoring the question, Adrien plunged in. "I know you're Hawkmoth. I heard you talking and I recorded everything. I'm not coming home, and if you make any effort to find me or notify the authorities, I will release the recording to the police." He didn't have a recording, but he wished with all his might that his father wouldn't call his bluff. There was a temporary silence on the other end of the line before Gabriel's voice seethed. "Don't do this, Adrien. This is all for you." "How is it for me? Did I ask for any of this?" Adrien said through clenched teeth. He felt sick. What was that supposed to mean? "I'm serious. I won't hesitate to expose what you're doing to the police. All I ask is that you leave me alone. I don't want anything to do with you. Don't come after me." He didn't wait for a response. He knew his father had heard the message and that's all he wanted. He hung up, smashed the phone underfoot, and threw it off the side of the building before curling into a ball again, in the same rusty utility closet he had used to make the call. Plag hovered by his cheek. "What are you going to do, kid?" "I don't know," Adrien sobbed. "You can't stay here all night." "Maybe I can." "Are you going to live in the streets, kid?" Plag asked rhetorically. He pulled a section of Adrien's bangs to the side like a curtain, causing Adrien to finally lift his head from his knees and look at his kwami with swollen eyes. "Don't you have friends?" "My father knows about Nino," he said flatly. "Who said you had to go as Adrien? What about Cat Noir?" "I don't have any friends as Cat Noir." Except Ladybug, but he obviously had no idea who she was or where she lived. "What about that baker's daughter?" At the suggestion, Adrien felt a rush of gratitude toward Plag. He was shaken and couldn't think straight, but it was true. He'd spoken to Marinette a few times as Cat Noir. They had a heart-to-heart when they were both feeling down. She had helped him with an Akuma, and she had even confessed to him. The last incident had admittedly been a little surreal, and he wasn't sure what her feelings about him were currently, but she was still a better friend candidate than any other civilian he could think of, and she was a friend to Adrien too. As long as he could keep her from connecting the dots between Cat Noir and Adrien, it might work out. "Thanks, Plag," Adrien said, heaving a sigh and extracting himself from the closet, his legs a little stiff from the cramped position. "Claws out." He bounded toward her house, the only beacon of hope that existed for him at this moment. Thank you for listening to Nowhere Else to Go, Chapter 8. Let me know what you think in the comments, or leave a like to support the channel. The next part is coming soon, so if you haven't already done so, make sure to subscribe for updates. Until next time.